All right, here we go. Well, everybody, we wanted to say good morning to you and welcome here to the 714. My man Colton and I are joining together looking at, we're going to look at Proverbs today. But first, Colton, how are you doing today? Like, how are you doing?
Doing good, I'm doing good. Um, I mean, when the leaves are changing like they are, I gotta be feeling good, right? I think,
Mm.
and a few days ago we had our mega night, which was so much fun, where a bunch of churches got together, with their youth groups. We had over 100 kids easily, and we had a really fun time doing that. So that was really enjoyable for me. But while we were doing that, we were outside and the leaves were changing, and I think a couple of us leaders were just like, "Wow, look at that! Like that's just amazing." It was great scenes, just seeing kids having fun, and then with all the colors around them, just the way God works is just amazing. So, but have a pretty good day. How about you?
Well, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. So I don't know if it's just me, like I'm just trying to be more aware this season, but I think it's just been the weather has been it's been such perfect fall weather
Mhm.
for like quite a while. Back in September, it was still pretty warm, but you could start to get a little bit of sense of that fall weather coming in. And now here we are, like almost the end of October, but it's just been so nice. And the trees, like you said, the leaves are just like on fire, it seems like.
Mhm.
I know some Octobers we've had snow, at this
Yeah.
point. It can be cold and kind of dreary and drizzly. So I've just been loving this fall weather we've been having and thankful for that. Um, just I don't know, man, just enjoying a nice cup of coffee in the morning and some baked goods going, just enjoying it, loving it, loving it. So yeah.
Mhm.
But we'd love to know, how about you all? Have you been enjoying this fall weather? Are you like, oh, it's been so good? Or maybe, maybe not. Maybe things have been just kind of rough. And we know sometimes um, when life isn't going very well, even some of the things around us, it's hard to see that the things that God's doing, even in the midst of a rough time, a storm. So we're just praying for you and lifting you up if that's the case. Um, I think one of the things we love about going through God's Word is the reminder of the hope that we have, regardless of our circumstances. Right. So today we're actually going to be going further into Proverbs. We're taking Proverbs for a while, and we're kind of each jumping through different chapters that we like. And Colt and I, we were talking uh, here just a little bit before we hit record, getting on here, and we're like, man, they're all so good. Like
Yeah.
you read a proverb, and you just read one verse, one proverb, and it's like, yep, yep, that's good. Mic drop. Just go apply it. uh, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to discuss it, but we're going to be in chapter 22 today, looking at these proverbs in chapter 22. Um, and just really encourage you that as we go through this, as we're reading through it and talking about it, just ask the Lord. I'm asking him right now that he would give us wisdom and understanding. Right? That's Proverbs thing. That's Solomon's thing, right? That wisdom is crying out to us like, you need me, you need wisdom. Because foolishness and all of that other stuff that wants to pull us away from God is also calling out to us. So when we read through some of these wisdom books like Proverbs, it's really important that we don't just breathe through it like, yeah, that's good stuff, good stuff. It's good to let it kind of permeate, kind of wash over and through us, and really consider it as we think, God, what is it that you want to speak to me here today? So I think we'll just kind of start reading. We were talking before that if there's something that jumps out to us, we'll stop, we'll talk about it. I'm reading out of the NIV today. Again, Proverbs 22, if you're following along with us. So Solomon, he's going on as he's been writing up to this point. He says this: A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Okay, so I know we were going to read a little bit, but that's just one of those first like proverbs. Uh, right? We talked about it. We talked about this stuff before. Um, in our mindset, a lot of times, the tangible things like riches, silver, gold, the cash dollar, the Bitcoin, whatever it is that you're working with, credit cards, debit cards, it's tangible enough. You can see it because you can purchase things with it. You can pay your bills, all that, and it's very desirable to have that income and that money. He's saying a good name, right? A good name is more desirable than any of that. So let's talk about that just real quick. Like, what is it? What do you think he's talking about when he means a good name? Is it just like John? That's a good name, right? I don't think so. Colton, what do you think he's referencing there?
Well, I think it's talking about, respectful, recognized, excellent in character type of person, a
Yeah.
good name. I think I don't know why it's popped in my head, but like just think about it. The Christmas story, like Scrooge, right? Like this is
Yeah.
like almost perfectly what this is talking about. Like, hey, he's got all the money and the riches in the world, and like he's on top of the world, but no one likes him. Like he's not a good guy. He's not got a good name for himself. Um, and then he's visited by all these ghosts, and he changes that around, and he spends his wealth, and then he's got this respect and recognize excellence of his character, his cool character changes and all this, and I think that's a great, like, story right there, especially during this holiday season, if you're thinking about it. That's the type of good name that I'd want. Um,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, as Solomon's already pointed out, and he's going to continue to, that those who seek the Lord and are really called by his name, right? That we're children of God. He's rescued us. And so when we're thinking about this from the perspective of being a follower of Jesus, are we taking his name? As we know, the commandment says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Don't take his name on and make it nothing, make it empty.
mhm.
When people look at you, are they seeing Christ? Because we're supposed to be his body. And I think that when we consider something like this and we look at it and go, okay, do I have a good name? Do they look at me and see me as a child of God, one who's following him, one who's that respect, that honor, those things that come from having a humble heart? Or do they see somebody like Scrooge and, you know, people who are prideful and arrogant and pretty careless when it comes to other people? They're very self-centered, obviously desiring material things more than spiritual things. I think that's kind of the you see a lot in just that simple phrase that Solomon wrote. There's a lot there, so I think that's great for us to consider.
Yeah,
Um,
and I like to just put, like, a good name, like as long as a good name, it's not always just, like, what other people are thinking about you, like, it's also, like, faith and obedience as well, just, like, that's part of having a good name, which is it's not just what people recognize you as, but that aspect of being faithful and obedient to God, that'll lead people into understanding who you are and lead to it being like that person has a good name for themselves, like, so.
yeah, that's so good. So he kind of carries this thought over a little bit. He says, the rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. So I think he's kind of flushing this out a bit more, right? That look, it doesn't matter how much money you have. God made you and the poor person next to you. He made you both, and you're equal in his eyes in terms of being a creation. And Jesus died for both the rich and the poor. And the hope is that we stop identifying with how much money we have or don't have, or what materials we have or don't have, and instead that we identify as children of God, um, because the Lord is the maker of them all. So he goes on, verse 3 here. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Verse 4, humility is the fear of the Lord. its wages are riches and honor and life. And really, he's kind of carrying this thought on in verse 5. In the paths of the wicked are snares and pitfalls, but those who would preserve their life stay far from them. So I think in those three verses right there, we're seeing this idea of, God is very faithful to us about giving us kind of these little road markers, road signs, warning flags, so we kind of know where we're standing with Him. Um, are we distancing ourselves from God? The prudent see danger and take refuge. How do we view sin in our lives? Are we being prudent about it? Are we seeing the sin and running far from it, as we see the scriptures point out? Clinging to what is good, abhorring or hating what is evil, or are we simple, meaning kind of that ignorance is bliss idea of just like, I'm good. I don't really care to know more. I just want to do what I want to do. And as he says, you're going to pay the penalty for that. Um, yeah, that's kind of some of the things I'm seeing those three verses right there.
Yeah, and I think maybe something that says by humility and the fear of the Lord. Like fear, you may be like, whoa, why am I fearing the Lord? But it's just like I think those two qualities are kind of connected. Like humility is about like yourself, like your own self-reflection, and just like, hey, I have humility before the Lord. Like I'm gonna like bow down, And then fear of the Lord is like the view of God. So it's like kind of like that fear of the Lord, fear of God. And it's like that view set of just like put those two things connected to like he is greater, I'm lesser type view set. I think that view on that, those two qualities will help you on that path of wisdom, like in like of like gaining what we're talking about here. Um, those riches and honor in life. Those are like the wise part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. People have asked that question before, right? Like, what does it mean to fear the Lord? And Solomon says it so plainly. It's humility. It's just recognizing who He is and who you're not,
Mhm.
right? And who you are in Him. And then again, verse 5, he kind of alluding to that again, that if you're falling into these snares and pitfalls in life, I've heard it so many times. I've experienced it where if I'm caught in a sin, I'm like, I just keep going back to that, like a snare, like a pitfall, like I'm like, God, why am I so stuck in this? And he's like, well, because you're heading the wrong direction. You're going down the wrong path. You're not actually seeking me. um, you know, you might be saying you are, but you're not, right? So when we distance ourselves from the Lord, again, if we're not being humble, if we're being prideful, any of that, that's a pretty clear indication as to why we might be stuck in a sin or feeling like we're not growing in the Lord, right? That we're just kind of stagnant. It could be because we're not being humble before Him, that we're not seeking Him, that we're just kind of doing our own thing. Um, and then verse 6, I think this is one that's been, you know, quoted a lot. Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
right? Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Um, it's a man, what an awesome statement, and really what an awesome promise. Um, it now, I know there have been people who have said, "Well, I tried to teach my kids about Jesus, and they've just rejected him, you know." But I think from everything I've seen in accordance with this verse is that if you start your child off in introducing them to Jesus, then they have been given so much evidence, right? Because He's faithful, He's going to make Himself known to them. Um, I mean, we don't know ultimately what a person's final decision is. I mean, when it comes to their last breath, I know sometimes people go through these seasons of life, right, where they're walking with the Lord. I've seen some that have kind of gone away and then they come back, and but most of the time it's just kind of a steady, like the stock market, right? You see that kind of thing where it's maybe dips a little bit, but it's the steadiness is that it's still climbing, right? It dips a little bit, but then it climbs, and maybe dip a little bit, but it's still climbing. And I think with our faith, we have those times where we stumble, we have those seasons of life, But I've seen over and over and over again where a person who's following Jesus continues to follow him. So if they make that decision when they're younger, um, I don't see people straying from that, because as the scripture says, once you come to know Jesus, the Lord, nothing can take you from his hands, not even death. Right? We belong to him for eternity. So if they choose to accept the way that you're helping them start off in life, then they're going to stay with it. The question is sometimes, did they really start off that way? Um, sometimes we try to introduce them to the Lord, but they just don't make that decision to follow Him. That makes it very tough. But that's just one side of that, or one thought of it. Um, you got a little baby girl now, Colton, and looking at her,
Yeah.
you're probably thinking, how how can I teach
Yeah.
her about Jesus?
Yeah, training her up, and I think it's cool we just had the child dedication too. Just I think about that in these verses of just like that's a great place to start right there. Like if you have a newborn, or not even a newborn, just a child that you're willing to like, hey, I want to make this like I want to train him up and be there. And I think like in those moments, like the child dedication or like or baptism eventually, as a younger person, and even where I'm working at right now, just with the youth, it's just like, hey, we have the ability to like really be a good like light for these kids in their lives and like be there for them and help them train up. And it's kind of like it's a nice step. Like it's and we got to be aware of it. Like as leaders of the church, as adults of the church, we just got to be aware that hey, we're everything we're doing is kids are watching, they're paying attention, and we got to help be a good light in their life. Um, and so I just think that like, yeah, this is like, it's very hopeful. This proverb is very hopeful. And I agree with you 100% that there's like that dip in the way it goes. I mean, you see through the Bible multiple people that are like with Christ or just with God, and then they're like, well, I stumbled a little bit, and then I'm coming back. Like I figured it out. I mean, we even just talked about Peter like a little bit ago. Like not that the fact like that he's a kid or anything, but like just in general, just like hey, denied Christ 3 times, and then he came right back. Now he's out preaching again, and so yeah, those stumbling blocks will be there. But as long as they continue on, they will not depart from that love from Christ. So I think
Yeah,
that's just a great like yeah encouragement in this proverb.
yeah, yeah. I agree 100%, man. If you're a parent out there listening and watching, and you're thinking it's never too late to start either. You might have adult children.
Mhm.
Never too late to share Jesus and encourage them in that walk of faith. So take courage with that. He goes on in verse 7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. That's been a verse talked about quite a bit, especially in financial circles, which obviously Solomon had a lot of wisdom, he had a lot of money. But I love the reminder that all of that money and of any kind, it's a tool. If we start setting it up on a pedestal, right, it becomes something we begin to worship and idolize. But to use it as a tool, but that's just a very practical knowledge. I mean, the borrower is slave to the lender. I mean, it's just he's like fact, Um, and as long as you owe somebody, you're indebted to them, whatever the agreement was. We all have mortgages on our house, or maybe we have a car we're still paying on, or whatever. And we know, like until we pay that off, we're owing them that. I mean, so it's very, very good practical wisdom to think about before going into something, a major purchase, looking at that from as many angles as you can, and try not to get into too much debt if you can help
Yeah.
it. uh, Verse 8, whoever sows injustice reaps calamity, and the rod they wield in fury will be broken. Just a great, well, I'm going to say with verse 9, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Um, Drive out the mocker, and out goes strife. Quarrels and insults are ended. So really, just considering, going back up to that verse 4, do you fear the Lord? Are you humble before Him, Or are you thinking more of yourself than you ought to? Are we looking at ourselves, maybe because we have a lot of material possessions? That can make it more difficult a lot of times to see, like, I am no better than anybody else. I think that's why he contrasts rich and poor here for people to understand in a very
Yeah.
simple way, right? Like, um, if you can have all the money in the world, but if you sow injustice, if you're not concerned with taking care of people and right being done, you're going to reap calamity. And if you rule in fury with injustice, it's going to be broken, and we see that time and time again. But you can rule with grace and goodness and justice and have a really great kingdom. I mean, that we kind of see here. But I think even in our own lives, we can see that. Like how are we leading others? How are we loving people or treating people? Are we doing it unjustly or justly? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's a accident that these verses follow what we just talked about the rich ruling over the poor. I think as much as it is a war, like a hey, like a that's how it goes as somebody who may be one that is borrowing, the person that is the lender here, it's just like the hey, who sows iniquity will reap sorrow. It's like, and it very at just like at the top, right? If you're somebody that's just like Scrooge, you just like practically what you just said, it's just like you're gonna reap sorrow. But he who has a generous eye will be blessed. So it's like, hey, it's about the people here. Like I don't think that was an accident at all that these two or yeah, these two verses came right after this. That's like, hey, we're setting you up. Like pay attention. Like you are as a lender, and some people do this. Some like you have you have a little bit power over those who are borrowing from you. But we can't use that in a way that is reaping sorrow, or that sowing iniquity, because it just won't be good. Instead, we should be generous and understanding, and for that you'll be blessed. So I just think those are set up perfectly.
That's so good. What a great
Yeah.
point, man. That's so good. Um, yeah, so he goes on, verse 11, one who loves a pure heart and who speaks with grace will have the king for a friend. The eyes of the Lord keep watch over knowledge, but he frustrates the words of the unfaithful. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square. Uh, just real quick. So, obviously, verse 11 and 12, there's some connotation there in terms of a physical earthly king and all that. But really, we can see our relationship with the Lord too, with what God um, extends to us. We think about the Psalms and David and the other psalmists writing about a pure heart, right? God created me a clean heart, a pure heart. One who loves a pure heart and who speaks with grace will have the king for a friend. So, the King of Kings, the Lord Himself, who sticks closer than a friend. Think about that. It's just there's a earthly practical sense to this, a wisdom to this, but also in the spiritual sense. Like, if we are asking God to save us and we love the things of God, um, He sticks even closer than a friend. He keeps watch over us. It's so good. But that 13, I think sometimes people are like, wait, what? What is he talking about there? There's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square. The sluggard says. In other words, probably not going to happen. There's not too often that there's going to be a lion roaming in the public square. That's why they had gates to cities and stuff to keep, not just marauding armies out, but also animals like that. It's kind of like making excuses,
Hmm.
right? Things that like it's just not going to happen. You're just making an excuse because you're being lazy. And I think we do this. Obviously, physically we do this, but wouldn't you say we do this spiritually too? Sometimes we make
Yeah.
excuses.
Yeah, I think we do it spiritually, or the things that we're trying to like. our sinful habits maybe too as well, of just like, hey, there's a lion outside, I shall be slain in the streets. I just think it's like, well, it's kind of it's so absurd that one, there's a lion outside, and two, it's in the streets. Like a lion would have been, in the woods or something like this. Like if it's
Mm.
hanging around outside. I think this is like a little bit of a call to action because it's the lazy man, right? So it's like, hey, I don't want to do anything that can put me in a situation that's harmful, or it's just like, well, this situation is really absurd. Um, I just think it's just like, hey, it's like, yeah, our own spiritual battles. It's like, I don't really know. I feel it's out. Something bad's gonna happen if I try to change it. The way I'm living my life now, so I'm just gonna keep living the way my life lives now. There's nothing for me to do. Or, I think, yeah, I think that's where this laziness, this slothfulness can very get into our own heads or in our own hearts. We're just like, I don't, I'm good where I'm at, so I'm not gonna change.
Mm.
Sometimes I hear people say that, and I think that's just like something that's going to weigh on them spiritually and physically, emotionally, all those things.
Yeah, and it's kind of an irrational fear. You touched on that, where, just like, I don't want to go out there, a lion's going to kill me, and it's like, again, probably not. Or go look and make sure before you go out. Like, we tend to let fear grip us when God is saying, "Fear not, for I have overcome." I mean, Jesus promised that. He said, I've overcome the world. The peace that I give you is not like the peace that the world gives. Jesus has made a way for us to take courage, to be courageous, to overcome those fears, to overcome the sins in our lives, all for the sake of giving him glory and reaching out to others for his name's sake. Um, so the idea here, like verse 14, the mouth of an adulterous woman is a deep pit. A man who is under the Lord's wrath falls into it. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. Verse 16, one who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. Um, I think sometimes, again, we look at Proverbs and we're like, man, it just seems like sometimes they're just thoughts, right? Put one after the other. But the relation there, again, how they're all connected is, where do we stand in our relationship with the Lord? Do you have a relationship with the Lord, first of all? And if you do, are you seeking Him? Because He's giving us all kinds of opportunities to follow Him, to be strengthened, to take courage. And if we listen to foolishness that's calling out for us, if we listen to voices that um, are not seeking the Lord, right, we're going to be led astray. And the mouth of an adulterous woman is a deep pit, a man who's under the Lord's wrath. A person who's listening to someone who's seeking another God other than the Lord God himself, right? Whether it's money, God, Jesus says that you can't serve God and money. um, or it could be a position at work that you're idolizing. It could be another person that you idolize. Anything or anyone that you set up, that we set up in our hearts as being just as important, not necessarily even more important, but just as important as God, that's a problem. And we need to be very cautious about who we're listening to, what we're seeking after. And I think it goes with 15, because in a sense, we're children of God and we're his creations. So folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. We know that's a discussion about physical parenting and children, right? But how do you discipline? How do you do that? But ultimately, spiritually, uh, we have foolishness, folly, bound up in our heart. Our sinful nature, our earthly nature, wants to sin, as Paul points out in Romans 7 and 8. It wants to disobey God. It's a part of us. God, in his faithfulness and by the Holy Spirit living with us, helps us to overcome that foolishness. And as Hebrews says, he disciplines those he loves. He's correcting us, right? That's what it means. So again, Colton, you and I are we're dads. We have our families, our wives, and our kids, and all of that. So it probably drives home a little bit more with us. But I think even if we didn't have children, um, would you say it would probably still resonate because we look at how we interact with others and what God's done for us? And I'm sure you're thinking of some of those same verses in Hebrews and looking at how He is such a good Father to us. And um, yeah, how do you when you read something like that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, just like foolishness starts at the very beginning. That's what I think. It's like, you know, like children will naturally sin without being taught how to do it. Like we're not that goes with everyone. We're all fools. Like foolishness is in the heart of a child, and we're gonna make problems. We're gonna cause problems. And it all starts at the very beginning, right? And
Yep.
so I just think when I read that, I think maybe I have, for me as a new dad, it's like grace, right? Like I haven't she gets like my daughter right now gets into her own problems, but like I haven't really met the wall yet of just like hey, you're intentionally causing yourself more issues. Um like that foolishness right now is just getting stuck in spots that she probably shouldn't be stuck in, like crawling under furniture and getting stuck. But I know it's coming, right? So it's just like that grace. I think that like you talked about, like the grace that God has for us in our own lives, it has to extend like for others, right? But the best way to correct that foolishness is, you know, um, through like I think just being with discipline in our own faith, like, and you kind of just see here, where that comes from. And I just think for me, it's more of just like, hey, there's got to be grace in this, and then there's a way to do it correctly, that isn't like, you know, too crazy. But I just think, yeah, that's what I think points out to me that hey, it starts at the beginning.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right at the start. Foolishness is at the start, and it's in the heart of a child, and we got work to do, people. Like, even when we grow outside the house, like, we still got work to do in our own lives, so
Yeah, oh my goodness, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we see that word discipline, and it probably sounds like a very harsh word to a lot of people. And I mean, we see God's
mhm,
discipline is so gentle, right?
mhm,
And it is a course correction. I mean, you talk about your daughter, and when she starts to really crawl, gets to those toddler years and starts reaching for things that could actually be harmful for her, you may a few times have to be like, no, no, and help, because she doesn't fully maybe understand. When we're kids like that, we don't fully understand everything. So
yeah,
sometimes as parents, we just have to say, we have to teach our children to trust us, right? Because ultimately we want them to trust God throughout life.
mhm,
But when they're just starting off, that's the dynamic of a parent and child. And so God is saying that that rod of discipline, or that staff of correction, is there. He's obviously using it in terms of I think, a shepherding term as well. I mean, his dad, King David, was a shepherd. I'm sure Solomon
mhm,
understood and heard a lot of stories from his dad about shepherding. So you also have that staff or that rod that helps to guide. Sometimes you got to pull the sheep back. They start getting astray. Like, oh, no, 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 you know. Um, and so God is just so faithful and so gentle. But if we keep testing the limits, and we keep pushing and pushing and keep trying to get further away from him, sometimes his correction has to get a little more intense. Like, listen, you're going to destroy yourself, and you can harm those around you. You can't do that,
yeah,
right?
and we just read about all the things that'll happen if we
Yeah,
like in 14, we kinda just touched on, but, like, it's like falling into a deep pit, like, we can fall into a deep pit of things, like, and it's just that's where problems start, right? Or just everything else we've talked about too. It's just like there's warnings, like we're going through. This is all wisdom. These proverbs are providing wisdom for us so that we don't fall into those pits. Um, and so yeah.
yeah, and they're all connected. I love it. Um,
Mhm.
Individual thoughts that can certainly stand on their own, but yet connected in the sense of uh, what is our relationship with the Lord, and how do we approach Him, and because he approaches us with a lot of grace and a lot of mercy. So I know we're pretty much out of time. We won't be able to finish the rest of this chapter, but he goes into these sayings. So we just want to encourage you today or this weekend, read those verses 17 through 29, and just consider, what God has done in your life. Um, and there's a lot of times that we don't even realize everything he's done. He's worked and been working even when we don't see it. But even the things that we can look at and say, I know God did this, and I know he's faithful in his promises. And so just take time to reflect on that. Take time to reflect on this wisdom that he spoke through Solomon that we can benefit from today. To look at how to handle ourselves with other people, right? All kinds of different relationships here: borrower, lender, rich, poor, parent, child, even romantic relationships, and all of this is wisdom on how we can relate to other people. And ultimately, that has to stem from our relationship with God. So asking him today, God, really show me what my relationship with you is like. Where are some things that I need to just kind of let go more of or give up to you more? And what are some areas that you've worked in me, that strengthened me, that I just need to praise you for, right? This kind of idea. So Colton, would you mind closing us out in our time today with some prayer?
Yes, for sure. All right. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the ability to meet like this. I just pray that these proverbs that we can come with just ears to listen, and that we're just here to really soak in the wisdom that is inside these proverbs. I just pray that you give us wisdom as we continue to work through all these little bits of information that are just gonna like weigh on our hearts and help us become greater followers for you, Christ. I just pray that you can give us grace for others in our lives. I just pray that all the situations that we are in, these relationships that we learn about, between being a father or mother, or a borrower, a lender, or rich or poor, that we can just work through what those mean, what that relationship needs to look like in our lives compared to those who that affects. I just pray that we can meditate on what we just learned, and that we can come back next week eager just to get in the word and hear a little more. Amen.
Amen. Well, everyone, again, thank you for joining us. I know I'm always blessed by just getting in the Word, and so we just pray you have a great rest of your day and enjoy this weekend, that fall weather, those beautiful tree colors, and all that out there. And we'll see you back here on Monday for the 7:14. So.
See ya.